Hello everyone, my name is Henry, or Eeveekami, as you would know me here. I played Unchained at the NAWCQ. I think it was 2 weeks ago now. I'm recording this kind of late. I had people asking me to do a combo video. That's what this is. I do have a spreadsheet on the way. It is going to be completely free for anyone who wants it. I don't plan on charging anything. I'm just going to be showing some example combos here, as well as two replays that show both the strength and weakness of the deck during my testing in preparation for the event. So this is the list, as you guys have probably seen from the deck profile that me and Craig Smith did, which will be linked in the description. If you want further, more in-depth explanation as to why we played certain things or why certain things are not here, you can find it there. As for our first replay, we're going to show off the Engraver one-card combo, which is the main true one-card combo of the deck. You much prefer starting with normal summon Lacrima, hence why we play 3 Lacrima. However, you can just start Engraver, and Engraver is also one-card combo, that's why we play 3. So it starts off, we go Sanct here in order to respect Droll. This whole line does respect Droll. We dump Paradise here. So the reason you dump Paradise is you already have an Engraver in rotation. You're not going to be keeping Lacrima Requiem in rotation here at all. So you do want to dump the Paradise. That way it's just an additional disruption. If you do think you need to put the additional Light Fiend in the grave and send the Engraver, you absolutely can do that. It's entirely based on the situation. So yeah, the combo, you do standard Fiendsmith stuff up until here, where you do something that you might know from Ubel, where you make Aerial Eater. Necroquip Princess is not always necessary. We do play the Necroquip still for the draw, for a couple of other reasons. Sometimes you want to make Caesar with it. But one of the main things is that we play Buio, and Mutiny in the Sky is one way that we really like to extend through things. And you need to play Necroquip in order to go Necroquip plus Buio into Aerial Eater as a way to extend while holding your Engraver in the graveyard to play through Nib. So you just dump the Sharvara, and you go into Yama here. Yama just adds a Ruha. If you're under Droll, you're able to just add the Sharvara from the graveyard, and you can keep extending. It's the same thing, but we're not under Droll in this example, so we can just keep going. You summon your Shyama, you link these off, you make Soul of Rage. Shyama summons itself back by popping your Aruha. Your Aruha will summon Sarama. Sarama, you get to set your trap, you get to pop your Soul of Rage, trigger your Soul of Rage to add back your Sharvara. This is very important because we do play the Abominable Soul. It is one way that you are going to layer your end board through cards like Evenly Matched, or cards also like Dark Ruler No More. This board is very layered, and one of the reasons we layered it this much and we do things such as keeping our Soul of Rage in the graveyard is that it helps us beat X-Ryziel. X-Ryziel, basically, if they have to start with it, they have to aggregate or negate the Caesar here. They can't aggregate or negate Soul of Rage, which was something that was really annoying in testing, forcing our Soul of Rage early, not letting us double remove with SP, you know, that sort of thing was really annoying, and so I decided that this was the much better way to focus the end board. And that's the combo. So you're ending on Wave Hiking Caesar with Abominable Chamber with Sharvara in hand. Abominable Chamber is able to summon Soul of Rage here. You have the detach off of your Caesar in order to trigger Sharvara, which will then set a trap card, which you can then pop with this Sharvara to summon Abominable Chamber and layer your end board even further. It is very strong, very hard to contest for a lot of decks in the format right now. The next combo we're going to show off is Sharvara plus Engraver. This kind of shows you what you do when your Fiendsmith stuff gets stopped, as a lot of the time you open Fiendsmith with another way to extend, and this kind of shows you how to do it. So let's say you get ashed on your Requiem here. This is a very, very common point to get ashed. A lot of people hold ash for Requiem. This shows you how to play it. any card. You could set a hand trap, it doesn't matter. You can set anything here, and you can extend. And from here, it's kind of just like standard old Unchained combo. If you're familiar with old Unchained and the tour guide stuff, then you'd understand what this combo is. This is basically your old tour guide combo. There are ways you can make changes to this combo. I don't believe I showcased them here. Okay, I do. So you can summon back your Engraver here when adding back your Sharvara. You can pop, you summon, so you specifically summon Abominable Soul here because you do have Abominable Chamber. You can bring this back, but also you want to keep your other Sharvara in deck. And you do just get to shuffle it back here because you need the you don't want to shuffle back your Soul of Rage, so you can turn this into Aerial Eater here. Eater then dumps Buio, which adds Mutiny in the Sky. You get to go Eater plus Shyama into Wave High King Caesar, and then you can Mutiny. You can summon out Loose the Dawn's Dusk, which was a big part of a lot of our end boards here, as it's able to protect itself and Caesar. And then you can Mutiny in the Sky, you can send away the sequence. So that interaction of sending away the sequence is something that is very important to keep aware of, because in the case that you do open, for example, Fiendsmith in Paradise here, and that's the card you pop with Sharvara, Fiendsmith in Paradise then can send Desiree from extra deck to the graveyard in order to send, which you wouldn't be able to do unless you Mutiny in the Sky, send away the sequence. So that is a very important interaction to keep note of when you are playing this deck. Next up is going to be showing you just what the deck can do when it opens Buio, and the way that this card helps you play. So let's say you normal Lacrima and it gets interrupted in Ash Blossom or something like that. I said Imperm here. Imperm doesn't work. Something you need to remember with Buio, I was up very late when I was like putting these together. I should have probably fixed this mistake. It's my bad. But something that's very important to note about Buio is that it has to negate the effects of the monster in order for it to activate, or in order for it to summon itself. So you cannot target a card that has already been negated by something like Infinite Impermanence. One of the reasons we're not playing Tour Guide is because Tour Guide is extremely weak into Infinite Impermanence, and we felt that playing Lacrima was a lot better because it can extend through Imperm, which is something that Tour Guide cannot do. So you link here, you summon. Okay, I did catch the mistake. I caught my own mistake here. So Imperm on Lacrima, I caught my own mistake here, which is good. You know, Requiem, summon Necroquip. You Buio on your Necroquip here. You link these into Yama. You get to add Aruha plus Mutiny in the Sky. And now let's say you get Drolled. Droll is the most common hand trap in the current format. It is something you need to be very aware of, and the reason we do this line like this instead of first going sequence here is in order to play around this theoretical Droll and Lockbird. So this is what I'm talking about with the Necroquip, with lines that you have to play Necroquip because it is a Dark Fiend in order to summon Aerial Eater. This is one of those lines. So you can Eater, dump Sharvara, Sharvara gets to set, and you're kind of just off to the races from here. I'm just going to fast forward it a little bit because there's not really a lot to really go into because you've already seen most of it. This deck does tend to do a lot of the same thing repeatedly, but when it does do a lot of the same thing repeatedly, it's really good at it. And so this is one of those examples of this deck is just, it's really good at extending through its own things or various disruptions in order to get to the same board. We're in the same place we were last time, same set card, Mutiny in the Sky in hand, you know, loose, everything. You know, we have Lacrima Requiem, we're able to keep the Lacrima Requiem because we play Necroquip. If you don't play Necroquip here, you don't get the Lacrima Requiem, and so I really disagree with a lot of people who think that that Necroquip should be cut. Next, we're going to show an example game. This is going to be against Maliss, where we have lost the dice roll. I'm just going to be honest out the gate. This deck, most of the time, is not beating a Maliss board. Maliss's board is very, very oppressive in the current format. A lot of decks struggle with it. I think that this is very much one of those decks, you know? Maliss is a deck that is incredibly hard to play against. It's incredibly hard to pilot as well. Overall, the deck is just difficult, but it is very good. It is the best deck in the room, and there's nothing to prove otherwise. Maliss just is the best deck in the room. So I recognize that this game is kind of a lost cause, and so I scoop it up. I would like to note that my opponent is 928 rated. I was not playing at the highest rated level, as I was only 612 at the time of this replay, but I was playing against some pretty competent players. I wasn't playing against like complete trash, you know? So I do draw Chaos Hunter here, and Chaos Hunter is sort of this like you just win versus Maliss button. However, I am going to tell you I play this game out and I decide not to use the Chaos Hunter at all because I did want to test the lengths that my deck can go during this, and this is going to show that, as Chaos Hunter is not a card you will always draw. We only play one of it because we're usually searching it, but I just want to show what the deck can do here. So we start with our normal summon Lacrima combo, and we just kind of go off to the races here. I don't remember if my opponent disrupts me or not, but we just do our standard line here. You know, we go sequence, we put 2 back, we summon Eater, Eater dumps Sharvara, Sharvara sets. You know, we choose to do the extended version of the combo here with Aruha and searching a Sharvara off of Yama. This isn't really necessary. A lot of the time you don't really need to do that. I just wanted to see how much further it could take me in this situation, which I ended up being like not really much at all. It sort of just like slightly changed the end board where I'm not required to pop the trap that I set off Sharvara, which at the end of the day, that's not bad. You do like to keep that trap. Because one nice thing about keeping that trap is you can reborn Yama. Yama says if this card is special summoned, not if this card is link summoned, so sometimes you do want to hold that Yama follow-up search. However, the way I do play this is very different. I pop the Aruha here. I go effective Aruha. I will note, I do believe I make an illegal summon in this game. It doesn't change the game state at all. He negates my Caesar. That's fine. So right here is where the illegal summon happens. I summon SP Little Knight. It doesn't change the game state at all. This could have been Anguish. I also could have Yama summoned back Requiem, popped Sharvara. That is also another play you need to keep in mind. So one of the things we do a lot is we keep our Requiem in our graveyard. And the reason we keep our Requiem in our graveyard is in order to summon it back without needing Lacrima in the grave. This was something I really had to drill into Craig's head as my testing partner, and I kind of had to get him to understand, hey, shuffling back the Requiem isn't always good. Yes, it's nice to have it in your extra deck for the next turns, but sometimes you much prefer to keep it in there because it is a fiend. It can be summoned back off of Yama. So like right here, the SP Little Knight happened, you know, he terraformed me, he's ashed. The SP Little Knight didn't matter. It was an illegal summon, you know, I screwed that up, but it didn't matter at the end of the day. To now continue things on, we go into game 3. And I break. Buio plus Sharvara is not combo. I've tried many different ways of doing this. It's not combo. If I set one of my monsters, this is now combo. This does play. And so you'll see here my opponent just passes. They activate Mistaken Arrest. Mistaken Arrest makes this hand actually very awkward because we can't go for Mutiny in the Sky. We're now playing into a lot of hand traps. So I meows just in case my opponent has March Hare and they're thinking that maybe Mistaken Arrest is enough and then they can March Hare and do all that. So I meows just in case. And I set a card, I pop it with Sharvara. and then they activate Dominus Impulse here. So now I probably should have just passed turn here, in all honesty. I think that trying to extend with Buio under Mistaken Arrest is a mistake. I shouldn't be doing that. Very much a misplay on my part, something that you guys should keep note of. I also forget to set off Sharvara here, which isn't great. Just making mistakes all around. Again, a lot of my testing happened very early hours of the morning. And that's, that's on me. He imperms my sequence. I'm just like, okay, I have to set, I have to pass. My opponent stays bricked, and so this is one of the very nice things about this deck, is it has a lot of grind. You go through a lot of your resources very quickly. However, cards like Sequence and Mutiny in the Sky allow you to continue to play regardless of that fact. So because of that, I can shuffle back Necroquip here, I can shuffle back Buio here, I can make Aerial Eater, I can activate Requiem in order to summon Lacrima, dump a Light Fiend, activate Engraver, bring it back, link into Yama. I can do all these things, and I can continue to do all these things every turn after turn after turn. And there's all these different ways that this deck can just grind through simplified game states, and that's one of the reasons I love it so much. So he ends up impulsing my Sequence here, which is fine. It's not the biggest deal. I end up going Requiem. I summon the Lacrima effect, send the Engraver effect, shuffle back Sequence, and then I link into Yama here. Making Yama allows me to now search. I end up doing a really weird play here where I search Shyama. And this might not be the optimal play in the situation, but this is the line that I saw. I was kind of looking out for more obscure lines, just kind of limit test myself, see what I could do with the deck, because this was more towards the start of my testing. But I attribute summon Shyama here. Shyama, I target itself because it can target a card I control, which then triggers Yama in order to reborn Sharvara, pop Sharvara, set a trap card, activate Shyama, pop the trap card, trigger the trap card, summon a Sharvara, and then make Wave Hiking Caesar. Well, I go battle phase first here to get in for some damage. I am covering life here. My opponent is at 68. Brings them down to 28, which is exact for Caesar, and passes. I have the double Lancia. I have all the follow-up. There's not really too much he can do about it, and he just loses. Unfortunately, my opponent did not say GG, which, it is what it is. People on Dueling Book don't always like to do that. Now, I'm going to show a game that shows why this deck can be very strong when you draw Fuelos. This was using an outdated deck list. I do have Harpy's Feather Duster in here. As stated with our deck profile, we chose to cut Harpy's Feather Duster last second. I did get a couple questions on that. Basically, we decided we wanted the time card over Duster. It was that simple. But this is going to be a prime example of why Fuelos is good with this deck. My opponent is playing Ryziel Heraldic with Small World. And they kind of start play, and I do have the Fuba here. So I'm just going to let this play out. I'm going to let their turn kind of play here. I do end up dropping the Fua on Sword Effect, just so that if they do overlay, I get the draw. I will note my opponent is 1136 rated, so decently high rated. I, at this time, was 600 rated. And yeah. So they are going to full combo here. They're going to full combo. I kind of just have to watch them. I end up never using this Droll and Lockbird because I think that Unchained is so good at pushing through boards that drawing cards off of Fua is more worth than activating the Droll and Lockbird occasionally. And I very much thought that this was one of those times. And so my opponent just kind of does their thing, yippee, and yeah. So we start off with Dustering the Cross. We do need to note that we are under a Dark Lock from Protos. That is very important to keep track of. So now we have a lot of plays in our hand, and in my opinion, the best way to always start with this deck is to start with the Fiendsmith package. Starting with the Fiendsmith package, because its main goal is to get you into your Unchained engine, is a lot better than just straight up starting with your Unchained engine, and a lot of people who play against this deck make the mistake of interrupting the Fiendsmith package a lot of the time. The Fiendsmith package is bait 9 times out of 10, and you don't really need to interact with it. And so we start with Engraver here. We grab Sanct just in case of a droll, which my opponent does have. I do choose to activate the crossout designator here, as after I took a moment to just kind of evaluate, I decided that there weren't really any other hand traps that could effectively hurt me here, and I really wanted to get to Mutiny in the Sky off of Buio in order to extend, because whilst I am unable to special summon Buio, I can still normal summon dark monsters in this situation, and so I saw normal summoning Buio as a possible win condition here. And so I decided to stop the Droll and Lockbird. I talents to take his Protos, and I start playing with my fire monsters here. He does Detonator, pop my target so that Aruha cannot special summon itself, which is slightly annoying. I would like the body, but I end up summoning another Aruha from the deck in order to Sharvara target it, which then triggers the Aruha in order to summon the water monster Shiyama. Something I did think about here was the possibility of Nibiru the Primal Being, but I also wanted the stat bonus of the 800 attack over the 2000 attacks, because I am going to go battle phase here with Caesar. Now, in order to break this board, we attack over Duo Drive, so that way there isn't an attack loss on my Caesar anymore. And now I can Caesar attack over the Starleech. Attacking over Starleech here, he ends up protecting it with Detonator, which now, because he protected with Detonator, I don't have to worry about the fact of the Infernal Flame Banshee and the Dugaris being protected by anything, so I do Protos Call Fire here in order to cut him off of half of his deck on the next turn, and now I normal summon the Buio with the Proto and use it with the Protos in order to link into Moon, where I now use Buio in order to add to my hand Mutiny in the Sky. I am now able to use Moon's on-field effect, which very rarely comes up, but when it comes up, it is a house. So we use Moon's on-field effect, and we link off both of my opponent's monsters into Underworld Goddess of the Closed Moon. Underworld Goddess of the Closed Moon is, in fact, a light fiend. This is very important here. So now I can Mutiny in the Sky. I can recycle my Caesar and my Shiyama in order to protect myself of his follow-up, because I do believe he has another advanced heraldry art. No, he doesn't. Okay, he only searched one. But in case he does have another advanced heraldry art, I don't want to eat shit to his follow-up next turn, and so I went into shuffling back my Way of High King Caesar in order to then reset up everything here. I can overlay, I can remake Caesar, I can link Moon into Requiem, I can go Requiem effect, summon out Lacrima, Lacrima sends a card. I think for a second here, I go Mutiny in the Sky, I send Sharvara away, because I realized that I forgot to set off Sharvara earlier, so I do set off of Sharvara here, because I can no longer summon Sharvara. I now Shiyama pop the set, and now I link these two off into Sequence. Sequence allows me to summon Desiree, and that is the game. My opponent scoops it up, and we go into game 2. My opponent gets a little frustrated with how long I was taking to decide. To be fair, I didn't know this matchup super well. I don't blame him for getting annoyed. We do open Fua again, but now you're going to see the biggest issue with this deck. And an issue that plagues the entire format, because unfortunately, Protos is not the only Archnemeses monster. There is another one, and the other one is very good against our deck. Protos is not incredible against this deck. It's very easy to beat Protos when you are playing this deck. However, it doesn't matter if you can beat Protos because Eschatos exists, which we are going to see my opponent play here and access Eschatos, and they are going to call Fiend, protect the Exciton Knight, and now I can't summon any Fiends, and I've lost the game. Unfortunately, this game is going to start off with a Perulia, which when you are under Perulia, it's not the end of the world. You can sort of play under it. However, unfortunately, my opponent did go for Fuvolos here, which you can't play under. We could absolutely play under the Perulia. We couldn't beat the Fuvolos. We look at our opponent's hand. We see another copy of Fuvolos with the Heraldic Beast Leo, which is a brick, the Sword Ryziel, the Small World, and the Ash Blossom. Something I want to go for here is I do play Mischief of the Gnomes, so I want to make sure that my thrust resolves. And so I start with Talents looking at his hand to check for an Ash Blossom, in which the Ash Blossom was there, and I'm able to thrust for the Mischief of the Gnomes. And I sort of just hope that it is enough to beat him. And unfortunately, it's not. My opponent just kind of plays here and searches the Eschatos, which he then has enough cards to banish for summoning Eschatos, and he calls Fiend, and that's kind of all she wrote. You know, he whiffs lethal here, but it doesn't really matter. We can't summon any Fiend monsters, and the game is over. And that's the unfortunate reality of this deck, is it is all one type. It will always lose to Eschatos, and there's not too much you can do about that. However, Eschatos is a very uncommon card in the format. I believe it's only played in Heraldic Ryziel at the moment. It might be played in the side deck of some other Ryziel variants, I'm not sure. But this deck list performed incredibly well for me throughout testing, just throughout general play. It was awesome. I loved this deck. I definitely plan on continuing to revisit this deck. I am possibly looking at taking it to YCS Anaheim. If I end up going to Anaheim, that is. I'm not 100% sure. But I might take this to YCS Anaheim if I do go. I do plan on finishing up the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet will be released on my Twitter page. It will be completely free. I will be putting a donation link because I have put a lot of work into this, and it would be nice to get some sort of monetary off it, as I'm not working at the moment. But at the end of the day, even if I don't, I did this all for fun. You know, the goal of this, and the one thing I dislike about spreadsheet culture is a lot of people do it for money. The goal of this was never for money. I just want to share this theory with you guys. I want to share the deck that I really enjoyed playing at the biggest event in North America. And so with that, I'm going to be signing off this video. I hope everyone enjoyed. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comment section, and I will be more than happy to share. And yeah, have a good one, everyone.